When can your son go back to school?
Not for a month.
Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call the Planning and Zoning meeting now to order. And let's begin by having a roll call. Start with Commissioner Rutke,
Jan Rutke?
Cindy Greengold.
Kathleen Baralt,
Laura Blackwelder.
Lee Hahn. All are present except for Commissioner Larry Brown. So let's begin with standing and saying the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Just want to wish a Commissioner Brown a speedy recovery before we start. And I just want to note he's had surgery recently. So I anticipate he'll be at our next meeting. I just want to, as we noted tonight, we said the Pledge of Allegiance, and it came to me that we are the only board that meets that does not say the Pledge of Allegiance, and so I wanted to rectify that. So each month, if somebody else wants to lead it, that's fine with me, but I just thought it was important for us to add it to our meeting. Next, I'd like to say that just 2 points of business before we start. I would ask that we have a lot of discussion, and I would ask that each of the commissioners wait to be recognized before they speak, just because I think if we speak out of turn and somebody else is about to speak, I think they lose their train of thought, and I think it will make the meeting more orderly. So I would just ask that you be recognized by the chair before you speak. Thank you. And the other item that I wanted to say is Commissioner Blackwelder has tonight will be her final meeting as her term has ended, and I want to thank her personally and on behalf of everybody here at the town. She has served for 5 years, is that correct? Since
Correct.
May of 2019.
Correct.
And I just want to say personally and as the chair of the Planning and Zoning that we greatly appreciate your time, your dedication and energy for the past 5 years. Your knowledge and work has made us more aware, informed, and educated. And I think you've really helped to, no doubt in my mind, to protect the resources and the treasures of the town. And you've been tireless in your dedication to that. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair.
Would you like to say anything?
Yes, I think you all know that I would have never voluntarily dismissed my ability to impact the town. But there is a difference of opinion between myself and our leadership in some of the decisions that are being made. And it is the mayor and the town council's authority to appoint, and I'm not being reappointed. That does not mean that I will not participate in the town. So, you all are going to get a lot of site plans, and I have every confidence in all of you. And I understand that you can only do as much as town leadership and town staff supports. But I think you all are good decision makers. And I think that you will do the best with what you have. And please remember that there's a time to go along and get along. And there's a time when you need to use your vote and your voice to make sure that the 7,000 residents of this town get what they deserve out of town government. So, the town's going to go broke if we pay for every single last piece of infrastructure associated with large developments. If large developments come in and they're substandard, they're not going to get rebuilt. You all have the ability to use the interpretation clause, the health and welfare clause, and that's not something that you should use flippantly, but you do have the ability to use it. And you also have the ability to place conditions on the site plans that you review. So if there are, for instance, fire safety questions, bring those questions up. If there are, for instance, HOA presidents or neighboring properties that need to be notified and have a stake in the site plans that you review, demand that those people have a voice to come to the meeting and see. You don't have to approve things the way that we were approving things when I first joined this board, which is like a steamroller. That's not a responsible way to develop or to approve a site plan. And we're going to be getting some big stuff because we're zoned for big stuff. I think we did a good job making people think. It will remain to be seen if we've made them think enough about the development that we're receiving. It's big stuff, and it can't be a free-for-all. So I know that all of you will do the best you can. I know you will, but you do need leadership support, and you do need staff support to ensure that we get good development that's good for our town, that people will appreciate, and that they won't sacrifice their tax dollars unduly for. So that's really all I have to say is I trust you guys, and I'll take a break for a little while, but I will still be engaged.
Well, thank you. And again, Lori, you certainly raised the bar. I've participated in the board prior to becoming a commissioner. I came for several hearings, and just you've raised the bar as far as on issues. You've done your research. You continue to do your research. You're very knowledgeable. You speak from the fact that you have looked into it and talked to people and researched the matter, and it certainly has made us more educated, more aware. So I thank you for that. And maybe town council needs you.
Maybe, we'll see. I don't know. I think this board is where the action is at. So please, I'm happy with the people on this board.
Well, thank you. Now let's approval for the April 24th Planning Commission agenda.
Move approval.
I have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. The next item is the approval of the minutes of the March 27th, 2024 Planning Commission meeting. Do I have a motion?
Move approval.
Do I have a second?
Second with discussion.
Go ahead.
I am not sure that this does what our commission voted for. And I know it was kind of a messy motion and a messy discussion, but what I thought we voted for was to direct the town planner to implement code that impacted only existing townhomes and single-family attached dwellings in existing neighborhoods. And I remember that this discussion said that we would include the date as of our meeting, which was March 27th. And I don't think that this clause exactly came out in that way. And I think what this code is a little bit confusing because it's very ambiguous about dealing with the grandfathering. It says research the grandfathering. I thought we were very clear about what we wanted, and we wanted those dwelling units to be grandfathered so that they can rebuild their decks and build like their neighbors in the existing community. So I'd like to see these minutes amended to paraphrase that and code that reflected that. And so I know that Sarah alluded to a townhome development that would be coming in that would benefit from us reducing setbacks, but I don't think this board wanted to reduce setbacks. And if we aren't very specific about the fact that it is grandfathered, dwelling units and communities only, we will have new development coming in with reduced setbacks. And it's important to note that we did not change the setbacks during comprehensive planning or comprehensive rezoning, which means that a developer decided to draw their site plan with reduced setbacks. And, you know, now we have everyday residents who can't rebuild their deck, and we're not finding a way for them, but somehow, you know, their plight is becoming a developer's benefit. And that's kind of one of the things that have caused friction over and over again on this board during comprehensive planning. And I know Chris tried to bring in some reduced setbacks.
Well, before we,
but we didn't.
so
reduce
is there
them.
something specifically that specific language in the minutes that you feel supports your position?
So what
And then I'd like the town planner to respond.
Yes, so we have section F in the code, which deals with all setbacks, and there's no delineation in this motion that specifically singles out grandfathered setbacks. And so rather than cross out section F in our town code, what we would need to do is add a grandfathering clause under section F.
But wait a minute. I don't want us to revisit this.
Right.
I want to make sure that what is in this document in the minutes was reflected on what we decided. And so that's what I want to make sure that's happened. And Sarah, could you respond to that?
Right. So in the minutes, you directed me to make sure that the grandfathering clause did exactly what you just said. So that's what research the grandfathering clause means. And I did that. So I think it's saying that you directed me to make sure, research how the grandfathering clause specifically should be written.
Okay, but so
So
this comes across as if it's adjusted code. So maybe we could just paraphrase what we motioned to direct you to do in our minutes. And I understand that the town council is going to do whatever they want with whatever code you present. But we didn't direct the code to come out in a way that,
and it doesn't. I did not send forward I sent
Okay.
forward code that does what you guys wanted. So the question is, you're asking, do you feel the minutes reflect that direction to me?
okay.
That's the question.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
So I would say that we would amend the minutes to say that the planning commission directed the town planner to implement code that allowed for existing townhomes and attached single-family dwellings in existing neighborhoods to build and rebuild decks and porches.
If the intent, if the minutes reflect what we directed the town planner at the last meeting, I do not want to revisit this. We spent over 2.5 hours on this document at the last meeting. It's excessive. And we cannot continue to every infinite change and anticipate every possibility. I don't want to revisit this. If these notes are reflective of what we decided last month, then I would like them approved and we can move on. I don't want to revisit more language about this.
So if each one of these numbers said 4 existing townhomes and single-family attached dwelling units, comma, so number 1 said that, number 2 said that, number 3 said that, and number 4 said that, then they would definitely reflect that.
Does anybody else have any discussion regarding this?
I'm referring on the point that we were very specific about the date that we're going to use for grandfathering up, and unless I'm blind, I don't see it here. Yes. Clause that we could use yesterday that said, there's nothing that's concrete and dated as we discussed.
Stand by. Sarah?
So when we left, because we had decided it was going to be existing townhome developments, because the idea is for the council to take this up right away, and there are no townhomes being developed right now, we said we were going to go with the date of adoption. That was my understanding, but I can certainly request it being backdated to the meeting if you so direct. But as no one's building townhomes, it was kind of like it's a month either way.
So, I'm sorry,
Go ahead, Cindy.
Madam Chair. What I'm understanding is that the code is going to read, and it's for decks and other projections for lots with grandfathered non-conforming side setbacks. The language number 4 is really the new language in red. The language we have in red is basically the motion that we approved that is as indicated in the underlined sentence above it, decks and other projections for lots with grandfathered non-conforming side setbacks. I'm assuming that language is the grandfathered language. It's the language for grandfathered projects or, dwellings.
So section 4 was more straightforward than section F.
Okay.
Uh,
So I'm seeing that, except that I know we did talk about a date, but I am just feeling that it is part of the grandfathering portion.
There's a grandfathering portion in F and there's a grandfathering portion in 4.
Yeah,
Both
right.
have grandfathering.
Right,
portions.
that's what I'm saying. So I guess the interpretation is what is grandfathering, and
Well, so I think the question is, what should the minutes reflect? Right?
right?
Yeah.
And we
Yeah.
did discuss a date. We did discuss a date, and I thought that
Yeah. You did at one point say it was
then
the
we did-
meeting, and then when I
we
rephrased
did
it,
talk about adoption.
when I rephrased it
Yes.
and we talked about that, we said adoption. So
I
that
do
was the
remember
one
that.
I
And
went
you
with.
have in here insert date of adoption. So you do
Right.
have that in there.
in what I sent to the town council. It
In
says
number
insert date
one.
of adoption.
Yeah, right. I do see that
In
in there.
both
So
places.
I think everything's covered, unless I'm missing something here, but it seems like everything's covered, that what we said is in here.
So I
Stand by,
just,
stand by. Commissioner Black. Jan, do you have any further questions? Commissioner Weaver,
I think I'm good.
Commissioner Hahn,
Not at this time.
okay.
so I would make the motion to include before item number 2, 4 existing townhomes and single-family attached dwelling units in existing communities, comma. Additionally, insert the same phrase on item number 3, 4 existing townhome and attached single-family dwelling units in existing neighborhoods.
Stand by, please. Sarah, that language, I just want your take on that. I don't want this to be, we're talking about making it complex. And I don't want it to be more complex. And I understand, Commissioner Blackwelder, you're what you want to be conveyed, but I don't want it to become overwhelmingly wordy. I mean, and to make it more confusing.
It is a
So-
record of what we decided.
Right. So it sounds like there's a difference between what's being suggested and what we're talking about, right? So this is the minutes. And this is what was I directed to do. But what I'm hearing is a change in the language that I was directed to put. So what it really should be is more to address 2 issues. The commission directed Ms. Franklin to modify the proposed amendment. And so to modify the proposed amendment to address townhomes that are existing constructed as follows. Like the change shouldn't really be to the language, because I read this language is actually what I read you for your motion. And you made a motion on what I read here. So changing this language would change what actually happened at the
You-
meeting.
You mean last month?
But there is,
Stand by.
So we're talking about the minutes, not what goes.
Okay.
And so to reflect, I think what Commissioner Blackwelder wants to do is reflect your direction to me more clearly in the minutes. And I think that belongs in this paragraph above F, where it says to address these 2 issues, Ms. Franklin recommended. So then you can say that the direction was related, that there was a discussion and it revolved around the townhomes. But I don't think changing the language because you made a motion on that language.
Okay.
Yeah.
What I don't want is I don't want us to revisit and make changes. If
Yeah.
these minutes reflect that, then I don't want it changed.
Yeah, I think you should make, if you make the changes to that paragraph above F, right? Yeah, so
Where it says to address
on
these
page
2 issues.
2, right at the top, to address these 2 issues, that's what you're directing me to do. So you could say to address these 2 issues and concerns that only existing townhome communities be able to have this exception. You directed me to modify proposed amendment as follows.
Okay.
I would make the modifications to this paragraph.
okay, so I'll make the motion as Sarah has suggested, to modify the minutes to say, the commission directed Ms. Franklin to modify the proposed amendment to reflect that setback and open space requirements for existing townhomes and single-family attached dwelling units could be permitted by the zoning administrator as follows.
Okay. Sarah, is that, I mean,
I just want to make sure it reflects what you actually directed me to do because it's the minutes. That's all I'm saying
okay.
is
So what you're saying that what Commissioner Blackwelder just recommended does not reflect what we directed you to do from the minutes?
I think it was more casually like, hey, we want people who are in townhomes right now and their neighbors have decks and they have decks. We want them to be able to replace their decks and build decks. But we don't want a new townhome community to be able to build decks. That was the direction that I heard rather. And so I think you want to reflect that because it's the minutes, which is a record of what you guys said.
Correct.
So, yes.
Commissioner Rutke? There is a date, insert date of adoption, right here in this number 1, F1. It's in italics. It says,
I remember saying insert date of adoption when I was reading it. Do you remember?
okay. So with Commissioner Blackwelder's change, does that alters the minutes of that what you were directed to do?
I think it does because
Okay.
I would say put if you're going to put something in that more casual conversation that usually I think it's just not always put in the minutes.
My second motion alters what the minutes reflect.
Yeah, because it's kind of like directed the zoning administrator to issue permits instead of just, hey, we
Okay,
want you to
so-
craft the language in this way.
Right. Well, we asked you to craft the language to only reflect a change in the setbacks for grandfathered townhomes and single-family attached dwelling units.
Correct.
Okay, so
And you've done that.
And I have done that. Yes.
So I don't want to perseverate with this. It's already 30 minutes. I am confirmed about, I don't want to revisit this. So if you have a motion and there's no more discussion and we get a second, we'll vote.
I made
For
two
approval.
motions and neither got a second, so those should be reflected in the minutes.
They will be.
Unless somebody wants to second any of them, but I think that adequately.
All right, then let's approval of the minutes of the March 27th.
Move approval?
Do I have a second? They are approved.
Opposed, but I think everybody else.
All in
approved.
favor?
Aye.
I'm sorry. All in favors? Say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
2 opposed. Let the record reflect that. All right, next item, we're going to move on to item number 5, public comment on any item on the agenda. Well, nobody has the capacity to call in. Is that correct, Sharon? Yes. And nobody's present. So let the record reflect that. And also, no correspondence received, Commissioner Clerk. Okay, thank you. Then let's move on to item number 6, old business, fines and penalties. And we'll begin with, the town planner has prepared a memo. And we will begin with if you would open the discussion with everybody has a copy of the town planner's memo dated 3/20/2024, and everybody's had the opportunity to read it. Okay? All right.
Okay, so when I did some research into how other municipalities addressed fines and penalties, what I found was a lot of the fine can be no higher than $1,000. That's state mandated. So what that allows when you have this cap, the state mandated cap, but no actual fines in there, is that your town council can pass fines in resolution form, right? Or they can issue fines depending on factors that you include. Like, for example, with critical area, one of the things you include is, did they knowingly do the violation? Was the violation particularly egregious? All of that. That allows them to fine a much higher fine for those and a lower fine for, I pulled up one bush and I didn't realize it. And because they can change the level of the fines more easily, you don't have, because like right now your fines are 500, 400. I think there's one that's 200,
Mhm.
$100. It's not, and the word just left. It's not keeping anyone from violating because they're too low. So having the flexibility to change them without changing the whole ordinance, I think it might be the approach you want to go in. So I made some modifications to some of the language, but I also kind of was thinking you might want to leave it more flexible so that you have more upward.
Sarah, where you made, I guess we have black and white copies. So where you made changes,
Mhm.
I take it that's on page 4, for example,
Mhm.
in that item number 2 where it says 600, that was a change you made?
Right.
I just see the gray shaded area because it's not in, I don't know if it was in color and the changes you made were previously in color and we have a black and white. I guess what I'm asking is, the changes you made are reflected in that gray. How would we know where the changes are?
Yeah, so it's really that I deleted certain references, but highlighted your fines to say, we should
So is it,
change these fines.
so is it only the changes that you made begin on page 4 with the fines, the 600, like in, for example,
Yeah, I was
in item number 2?
yeah, so I was removing references to
Those
the
that have been removed don't show.
legislation. Right, so none of the fines were removed. Now that I'm looking at that, I'm sorry. I actually highlighted the fines rather than removed them.
So,
And I changed shall to may, or may to shall, I think, somewhere. But
so are there changes that we should note that you made that show or no?
no, because what I think you should do is consolidate, and what I think you should do is consolidate some of your pieces, right? So I said consolidate 6 and 8, right? So
Mhm.
6 is about clear cutting and 8 is about development on slopes, right? Those fines could be the same and it could say a fine no greater than. And then the other piece is that because critical area fines can be larger. So you want to put no municipal infraction, the critical area, so that you have all of the fines in there. And you can charge a maximum fine when it is found that it is particularly egregious or continuing.
Okay.
So if you guys would like me to do that, then I will go ahead and do that consolidating and send you revised documentation. But I want to make sure that's actually what you want. If you want to set the fines for everything, we can still do that.
All right, so let's begin with Commissioner Rutke. Do you have a thought about this?
I like the town planner's approach that we should be given the flexibility of something that's more egregious than something else to be able to pick the fine that's appropriate to whatever happened. I'm much more comfortable with that than a $200, $300 fine for given things when, well, that's what I believe.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Weaver.
I have a question because I thought you were saying earlier these numbers seem higher than what you said the state minimum was or maximum was, but we can have these. That's what I had a hard time following.
So there's municipal infractions and then there's the critical area violations and DNR. So they're different. And then I'm trying, the words are just not sticking in my head tonight. But with the tree board, for example, you have the municipal infraction and then you have I think it's civil.
Civil code.
Right. So there's two different levels of fines. So municipal has a lower limit, but you can actually get a higher limit in there if
Okay.
you legislate it. Yeah.
Okay. Just that's what I was like. These seem bigger than you said we could have for that.
Right. Because it's kind of, it depends on how it's how the infraction is done. So I pulled up this shrub. I didn't know I was supposed to. You can't charge them
Yeah.
that high amount. But I just cut down 40 trees. You can.
Okay.
So
Vice Chair?
I may be a lone wolf on this, but I'm from the land of craziness.
Lone
And
wolf.
I'm from the land of you don't play easy because then you get all kinds of egregious behavior and, people just will do what they want to do. I think the idea of using intention as a way to grade a fine seems a little unreasonable because who's going to say, yes, I intended to take this out? You don't see that in California. If you do it, you get the fine. Okay, because people don't tell the truth ever, and they're never
What?
going to admit to it. So to grade things on, gray shades of gray seems ridiculous. And to grade things just, okay, you would do 300 here and a 500. No, that doesn't make any sense to me. And, from somebody in the healthcare profession where everything has to be precise and you have to go on black and white and measure everything. And, you can't, if you start doing the shades of gray like we've been doing, then people are going to perceive what they've been perceiving for years. And that is that people in code enforcement and planning are always on the take. And that is why this never works because, oh yeah, you only had to pay that. Well, I only had to pay this. And oh, you must have given something more. And there's always and I know you're like going, okay, but I'll tell you right now, that's the hubbub in town. And whenever anybody gets anything over anybody else, they're going to say, oh, what did you pay off? How did you pay off somebody to get that? And that includes fines. Oh, I paid less because, I gave them this or whatever. And this is where the whole ethics board comes in and whatever. But, if you from the other side of the country where they really have a pollution problem and they really they're really much more concerned about the environment than we ever are here. And I've seen California go from gray and basically water you couldn't see through to water that's actually green and actually turquoise now because they've implemented a much stringent policy than this. And, I lived, when you are 20 miles away from the ocean, you can't wash your car because all of a sudden those pollutants go right down to the water. And, I'm just saying, if we don't take a little more, if we don't have a little more courage as a planning commission, as a town council, as a whatever, then we're going to have mature 100-year-old trees taken out, and you're just going to have a minimal fine of a couple, $1,000 or $2. That's peanuts for somebody who builds up on B Street and builds a custom home. This is ridiculous. And I know that's coastal, that's a critical area, and that can be, you can charge more, or you can sue them for more. But I think if we don't mean business, we're not going to get people understanding that we mean business. So I have a different take on this, and I think we need to, instead of, just for a little tree, that'll be just 300. I think everything should be the max. And you can't ask people, did you mean it or did you not mean it? Is it intentional or isn't? Because everybody's going to say, oh, I didn't know. Everybody we have to have a marketing thing. We have to have everybody get a letter. Every owner of a property gets a letter. They upfront know, hey, you have responsibilities in town to whatever it is, to keep these ordinances, or you have responsibility to maintain your property in such a way that you're not cutting down this in the critical area, et cetera, or these are the fines. And they're not going to be little piddly $300, $400 things. It's $1,000 and up. And I don't think you should, this is ridiculous. So I say, instead of combining things, because to me, taking out a tree that could take down a house is as big of a deal as somebody putting up an extra structure. So when I went through each one of these different sections that are violated, I'm thinking, I don't really see much difference. And why are we at 400 for this and 500 for that? And it didn't make any sense to me at all. So, because at the end of the day, we don't know what those consequences are until indeed the house falls down because that tree was taken out, or there's runoff and that, whatever. And I've seen enough cases where little things turn into big mountains, and we can't start out just allowing people to just, take the fine and go. Because what is that adage? And I've heard Commissioner Brault say it: ask forgiveness and what is it?
It's instead of asking permission.
And
ask
instead of
for
asking
direction.
permission, you ask for forgiveness. And that is what everybody says, and that's what everybody does. And if we don't stop here saying that, we're never going to be able to clean up the water. We're never going to be able to set an example of, hey, in the town of Chesapeake Beach, by gosh, we mean business. You
So-
can't take out that mature tree.
Your recommendation would be, I just want to make sure I understand, the
so-
maximum fine.
I would say and I also want to keep you out of the bit, or the code enforcer out of the business of making a judgment call on, okay, what is this really going to be? And it shouldn't be, I saw a may on page 2 here. That should not be may. It should be shall
I changed-
notify.
I think
So
I
on
changed
page
them
2,
all.
that needs to be changed to shall. And everybody should get a letter. And yes, you may give them 30 days to make a change, or, whatever they have to do. You give them 30 days, or bam, they get that $1,000 fine and up. That's how I would do it. But, I might be the lone wolf here because I know you guys are too nice.
Okay, Beowulf will.
That's what I think. So anyway, that is, I should make a motion, but I just want to hear what everybody else has to say before everybody else, go ahead. And then I'll come back and maybe make a motion.
Commissioner Blackfelder?
Okay. I am more of the thinking that Jan iterated, that intentions do matter. If we start melding the fines that we would give to some unbeknowing residents and a developer or contractor, we get into the problem where either the fines are too high for your everyday resident, or the fines are too low for your developer or contractor. And so that is probably why the Critical Area Commission developed this language that does point to intentions, because a developer, professional contractor, or the like, will not be able to prove that they did not know. Whereas an everyday resident could make the case. And if you believe that everyday resident, maybe you don't throw the hammer at them and you educate them. But the consequences are far greater if you mesh the two, and now the consequences for the developer or the contractor that should know better are less. And so I like the intention language. I think the critical area, I think we should stay as close to what the recommendations of the critical area commission were. Because that is their job, to protect the critical area. So I don't like the idea of max fines and they apply to everybody in the same manner. I think that you will get developers taking advantage of that situation, or you will have residents that make a mistake that really probably don't deserve that kind of fine. And then we also have, to speak on the education piece, yes, we should educate our public, but I would caution this board of codifying that. Because all that's going to do is take a developer like the one that's sending the Board of Appeals through 20 hours of nonsense. They're going to use something like that to do the exact same thing. And so, yes, educate. No, do not codify education, because that's going to be very problematic legally. They'll just say, oh, you didn't educate me and you said this and you said that. And, you know, anything that goes out on that town website is going to be up on a PowerPoint and a appeal. It'll be a mess. So those are my thoughts on that. I think the intention language is necessary to retain.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Hahn?
So I agree with both sides.
Uh-oh.
So here is my 2 cents. I think there should be a fine limit for the homeowner, and I think there should be a fine limit for the developer. And that way, that will eliminate the difference in the potential. Because if the developer wants these trees taken down so he can build in that area, if he's paying the homeowner fine, it would be a lot less, and it wouldn't affect their overall budget that much. Where if we had higher fines for the developer, that would make them hesitate. So then if you have the homeowner that unintentionally, who doesn't know, who just moved here and bought a house, and they do something, I mean, we don't have to necessarily keep these lower fines, but we wouldn't put necessarily the highest fine that we would potentially give the same developer, so that it would have the same financial impact on both. It's my thoughts.
I just want to say that I've spoken, and I think we've talked about this before. There's now on the town website talks about if you remove a tree or vegetation, you need a permit. We've just been made a tree city, and with that comes the establishment of the tree board. And so I agree with Commissioner, the Vice Chair. I think that this idea of asking forgiveness permeates, and, you know, you have to say no, you know, in regards to the reality is things change, pure and simple. As I said before, you know, my neighbor has a pool on B Street. I am not, you know, if I want to build a pool, I'm going to be told no. And that's just because it's now 2024, the topography cannot support that. And previously, it was allowed. And I think we have to, this is the only way. I mean, I watch people as I walk through, you know, the town, they're spraying Roundup all on their weeds. And then when I talk to them, they say, well, I'm allergic. I have poison. I can't dig up the poison ivy. I'm highly allergic. Well, there's no education about Roundup, and that runoff is going right into the bay. And so I think we have to, you know, if it appears on the town website, permit for any removal of vegetation of tree. If it requires a letter to every homeowner that's already in the town, or any new homeowner by the town, I think it's worth the education. But I think that money talks. And unfortunately, somebody gets, you know, The tree board just had an instance where somebody took down 62 trees. 62, not 5, not 10, 62. And when asked about it, they were like, well, okay, I understand the trees in dangerous areas, okay? Like the tree's about to fall on my neighbor. I understand that. But, you know, one of the comments made by the owner was, well, Department of Natural Resources drove by and they told me I can't have any trees that cover the view to my home. They have to be removed. They've got to be able to see my home from the highway. I'm like, what? So I think the ignorance is not an excuse. And I think you can, although intent might not be easy on face value to approve, when somebody takes down 62 trees, I think the intention is clear. And I noticed in this language, they were saying if you clear more than 1,000 feet, then obviously there's intention. So I think that we have to come down. The idea that there could be clean water in the bay, I would love that. And I think it has to start here. And I totally understand. People don't like to hear no. They don't like to be denied permits, but that's the way it is. So that's my opinion.
May I just say something about education?
Yes.
It is important that we educate that there is a difference between the urban forest tree ordinance and the critical area regulations, because the urban forest tree ordinance does not protect any trees smaller than this. I have an entire forest conservation area behind my house, and most of those trees could be cut down with no fine at all under the urban forest tree ordinance regulation. It's a very,
How can they be cut down without a permit?
and that's
There's forest conservation too.
where residents are going to get confused if we keep saying tree ordinance, tree ordinance, tree ordinance, and they read the tree ordinance, but they don't understand that there are also on top of those critical area regulations that they need to adhere to. There's going to be confusion, and there's going to be people claiming that they don't know. And so I didn't bring the ones for Annapolis or DC, which are, protect smaller sized trees. But regardless, when we educate, we need to make people understand that there are critical area regulations that have nothing to do with the tree ordinance, and they are still applicable. And we need to make sure that developers don't violate the intention of the critical area ordinance. I think the Critical Area Commission did come up with the best way to account for that, and it was the language of intention, but I've already said that. So I just wanted to make sure everybody understands if we're going to meld the tree ordinance and the critical area ordinance and use the same use the same parameters and the same type of language, you're not protecting much. So you need to keep those critical area regulations intact and make sure that people are educated about those and that they supersede the tree ordinance.
Thank you.
I wanted to clarify the intent and egregiousness, and I do think if someone takes a tree down in their backyard on B Street, whether they meant to or not, that falls under the egregiousness. If you take your boxwood out right next to your house foundation, that's not, you maybe didn't know, it's not impacting other people's steep slopes, or it's not having a massive impact on stormwater. So if you took out your boxwood, you learn that, oh, you weren't supposed to do that. You come in, you say, I'm going to put in this shrub, then should you really have $1,000 fine versus I took down a tree that there's no replacing that right away, right? And so that does have a higher fine. And to go to the tree ordinance, there are totally different regulations for critical area. But because of what happened on Cox Road and because of the fine that has been issued, everyone who is cutting down a tree in Chesapeake Beach right now is showing up at town hall asking for a permit, whether that tree is 8 inches around or not. So that fine made an impact to people to understand I have to come in and get a permit. And the town is making sure that they're working on systems so that anytime you do anything, right? You're going to do your HVAC, you're going to do an addition, you're going to change something inside your home, whatever it is, come to the town first and get approval. So that's the direction that administratively the town is moving. So yes, come tell us about your 8-inch around tree that is dead and get our permission first before you cut it down. And so that's the approach they're taking, and that's what's happening. So I do think you do need multiple levels of fines, and that's why I'm suggesting you have a max fine, because there might be something that was unintentional. These 62 trees, they say it was unintentional. That's fine. Even if you found it to be unintentional, it falls under egregious.
Well, I just want to say that, this is a cultural change.
Mhm.
And I think prior to this, people just felt like, yeah, you can do that. Go ahead. Yeah, do it. And then they're like, and it was allowed. And I think that, as you just mentioned, that town hall now is taking these very seriously, and permits are being denied, and permits are being denied, people are being fined, and that's only going to continue. For example, the tree board, we're looking at what arborists recommend, and this, but to change this culture from laissez-faire to you better ask permission, because not only are you going to get fined, but there's also going to be penalties involved in that. And people will hear the message if it's attached to money. And I just think that I'm for the education, but people, if they're going to, town residents are going to do something on their property, then if they don't know, we've got to set the culture. Well, I better call. I mean, can we do this? And I mean, we're a small town, and the fact, like, if you call town hall, somebody is actually going to answer the phone and they're going to give you an answer. It isn't like this is, 3 days later you'll get back. Somebody will talk to you. And so but I do think we've got to change the culture here. Commissioner Redkay, yes.
On B Street, regardless of the size, and no matter who it was, that's a big deal. And I also agree with Madam Chippewa that
Guess that's me.
Seems so.
I want an iron hand too. I love this thing, but I'm just not. If we're allowed to put up really high fines on this, for different things, it's the awful. But I have not got the impression that we just select what we want. We have limits based on the state.
I forgot to mention that if you look at the last bit and page, that's critical area stuff. And if you read it, it says each violation that occurs and each calendar day that violation continues shall be a separate offense. So that's $1,000 every day. It's not fixed, which adds up.
And there's a timeline, right? 15 there's 15 days to say, uh-oh, yeah, I got your letter and we're going to do this. And then there's 30 days, do it. And then
Mhm.
after that, the fine is every day that it's not done. Is that correct?
I don't think that's currently,
I thought that's what I read as far as,
I would say you want to, yes, that's like how you might do your property standards. But also, again, if you have a developer who knows that they know that they shouldn't have on day one and they need the 15 and the 30 days before you start issuing.
Which is your
Right.
recommended language?
So I did not provide recommended language because I really wanted to know what your guidance was. If I created recommended language, it could be totally off target.
so, but your comment under recommendation, you had said that not individual fines, but maximum fines, which
Mhm.
would allow more flexibility and the ability to scale the size of the fines in regards to inflation.
And you guys could, you can decide who issues those fines too, right? It doesn't have to be
I thought the
that
town
set in stone.
administrator admitted.
Right, but you can, when you redo this legislation, you can have certain thresholds that trigger you all to, the same way the tree board issues the fines for trees, right? You could say if X square feet are disturbed, or if a tree over this size is disturbed, or what, you can create a threshold to which you guys have to look at. We have the legislation. We can decide who gets to determine if it is intentional or egregious, or both.
Yes.
So I think my point was that I want to be more specific. Even the term egregious is subjective. And what's egregious to you may be not so egregious to somebody else. So I, again, think we need to be specific on what we want to, if you're going to go with, basically modifying the amount of fine up to $1,000. I mean, to me, it's $1,000 is laughable. And you might say developer. Well, I got a guy across the street who's a developer, and he just buys up one house at a time. But he's a developer, but he still does what he wants to do because he's a developer. And so I'm not sure that. I originally thought, well, maybe developers get charged that, and then the little guy gets. But we don't even know who that is anymore, so we can't even really do that. So I think what we have to do is basically say that anything within a certain size of a yard, let's just say a 10 by 10 plot, would go under a certain amount, and then anything over a 10 by 10, because anything over a 10 by 10, you're majorly doing some landscaping. You're doing some real work there. But anything within 10 feet by 10 feet, let's just say, that's just a little tiny, it's usually, I mean, maybe it could be a mature tree, but we could make an exception for a big tree. But I think anything under 10 by 10, let's just say, would be something that you could make a determination under $1,000. And then anything over that should be qualified as a $1,000 fine. And I don't see any reason why in this day and age, when there are no houses under a certain value now, that people, if they can't pay it, we put a lien on their house. Simple. It happens all the time. You don't pay your HVAC bill, there's a lien on your house. There you have it. So I don't have any problem with making sure that people understand the validity and the necessity to, as Commissioner Brault says, to change the culture that, by golly, we've got to say our bay and our you come to a beachside town and you have a responsibility. And if you go to the West Coast, you go into Laguna Beach, by golly, your height doesn't go over 20 feet. You can't do this, you can't do that. And you know that when you buy a property there. And they should know that when they come in here, by golly, we have to live by certain rules, and because we're protecting our bay and everything around it. And because of that, we now have jobs here. We can fish here. We can have tourism here, et cetera. And the business people will love it eventually. They may not at first, but you've got to have some courage in saying, let's a little tiny homeowner with a little tiny plot, okay, we're gonna maybe give you a little forgiveness here, and there's less of a fine. And by golly, if you restore it, there's no fine. You know, we'll give you 30 days to restore it. So, I mean, if I'm the last one to speak here, I think I could probably come up with some motion, but because I was confused on all the different, okay, let's put things together, let's not put, this was a lot of concern, and I thought I was the only one out, you know, on a different planet here. If I'm hearing some consensus in the idea that people think we need some teeth in this, or it doesn't make any sense, then I think the way we need to start is, oh boy, this is going to be tough because it needs to be, I need to think about this unless you have it. Oh, you
have a
have, she has her
recommendation?
hand up.
I was gonna say, could you direct me to present to you a draft revision, or even just delete everything, or however, based on what you guys want to see? And I really like the 100 square foot tree size thing that you presented, but it's up to you all. But if you guys can tell me, and then I can bring a draft that matches what you're asking for, and then we can work off of that instead of trying to
Yeah,
work off
okay,
others.
that would probably be a better idea. Okay, I want to go back to the idea of, and the reason why I came with 10 by 10, because I'm looking at my own yard in my head and I'm thinking, if I'm just going to do a little bit of re-landscaping and whatever, and I'm not going to, okay, now would I have to distinguish between the critical care area and the non-critical area? I probably would have to do that too, right? Or no?
Just ask me to distinguish between it.
Okay,
when
so
I-
we would have to distinguish between those two, but
Yeah, I would have to do that anyway to
you would have
comply
to
with critical
anyway, of
area.
course, but I think we should have a minimal amount of property that somebody can do whatever they do, because I don't think a 10 by 10 is really going to make a lot of disturbance in the immediate future that they can't restore if it's so needed. So I would just come up with a 10 by 10 plot of land that can be disturbed, and without having to go to the $1,000 fine. And if they don't get a permit, they have to get a permit otherwise. Well, they still have to get a permit, but that would be my idea. And then the $1,000 fine kicks in immediately within the 30-day period if they haven't made their change, or they retrofit it back to the way it was, basically. And of course, with the cut down a mature tree, there is no going back. You know, you got the fine. The end.
Commissioner Weaver?
I like this language being presented to the planner. One question though, even when you say, okay, they can do 10 by 10 without it, but like in what kind of time frame? Do you know what I mean?
It's a 30-day.
So could every 30 days, I mean, just to play advocate here, right? Could every 30 days I'd be like, well, that was another 10 by 10. Well, that was another 10 by 10. Like,
I'm sure that could happen.
Good
If they
point.
have a big-
Like,
if they have a lot of
you
acreage, they could do that.
You could do first offense, second.
You could do that.
Repeat
too,
offender.
Yeah, there are ways to,
but if we're saying that they don't necessarily need, oh, they always need,
a
oh, but
permit.
it would be a lower fine
Yeah,
if
you
it
would
was
be-
under a
you'd
10 by
have
10.
some-
Okay, I gotcha.
Madam
some
Chair, just for the
variability.
record, everyone in Chesapeake Beach needs to come into town hall for permission before they do
Right.
anything.
Get ready.
Yeah. Do you have staff? with-
Perhaps
that's
we
the
should make a
question. Do you have
motion
staff?
directs the planner to include that language in the regulation.
That you would need a permit for anything?
Removal of trees and vegetation require a permit.
There is, that's on the town
And-
website. We have that.
Right, but she's writing the code. The town website is not the code.
I understand that.
Continuing with that, I think any changes, whether it be an alteration to a house, alteration to the landscaping, all has to come get a permit. I think if you want to direct a certain person, they have to be a code enforcer or the town administrator, whoever, whichever I don't think the town planner would have the time to be able to, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong about that, but it used to be the code enforcer. We used to have the code enforcer do this. right? But we don't have a code enforcer any longer.
So a couple
am I
things,
wrong?
because I think we have like talking about the process too, because some of this is getting into process. But with regard to how the fines are drafted, so they go back and they refer back to, so any violation of section 290-17 is critical area right now, has X violation, but you can add in that any violation larger than 100 square feet has this fine, and less than 100 square feet has this fine. A second violation has the higher fine. In all that, you can put that in there, but it's always going to refer back to a violation of 290-19 or any
Right.
part of
Mhm.
this chapter.
So,
So-
may I ask a question? Sarah, are you suggesting that we direct you to retain all the critical area regulations and suggestions for fines in the model ordinance and add to them? Is that, because
The
I would
model-
be for that. I would be for saying, all critical area regulations as presented in Comar apply additionally, and then have a set of regulations that Cindy's describing. But I think if we get too specific, we get into what we're doing with the tree ordinance, which with the tree ordinance, we have language, it sounds great. But what we're really doing is giving people permission to cut down anything smaller than this. And so when you have specific language, beware that that specific language could be giving permission rather than deterrent. So I think we would, unless you're really going to review this language that is going to be presented to you and dig into the details and do the what ifs and do the, the analysis, that you are going to risk creating a regulation that gives more permission than deterrent. And if you're not willing to do that, I would recommend just sticking with what the Critical Area Commission recommends. And I definitely think that we should direct the planner to include the language that she pointed out that says, each day that the violation continues thereafter shall constitute a separate offense punishable by a fine as set forth in subsection A2 or 3, or some kind of like language that allows the fine to multiply.
I think that's already in the code, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
That's already there.
So Sarah, do you have a response?
I guess I just want to get direction. Like I will go to the model ordinance. I will take what you've given. I will use my own knowledge. I will put it all in the blender and produce a document that then we can have a discussion based on.
Okay.
So I think if you guys are all in agreement on what direction you want to go, then that allows me to craft, and we can drive into the details over the next meeting or two to resolve it. But I think right now we're being theoretical, and it would be helpful if we had something specific.
Okay,
to talk to.
and the, we're using the 10 by 10 as the,
We can use
I
any-
guess,
we can use
milestone.
anything. We can use anything. You can use 5 by 5. I mean, I don't care what it is, but
Oh,
I mean, do you
why don't we,
think?
you direct me 100 feet now? You guys can
Yeah,
get
we can
into
do 100
whether
feet
that's
now.
100
That's
square
right.
feet or
100 square
200 square
feet.
feet or 50 square
That's
feet
right.
next, when you have language in
Okay.
front of you.
And that would be, would we still use the same parameter, 100 square feet? That would be under 100 square feet and under would be $1,000 fine, and then above that, 100 square feet would be a different fine, or no?
So
Not that specific.
my understanding is that I'm honestly not sure if the legislation passed to up it to 2,000. I'm still trying to find that. But by the time you're adopting this, we'll know whether it's
Okay.
1,000 or 2,000 that's your maximum, and we can put that in there. So how about I just throw in some numbers that I am not in any way attached to, but are based on some data, and then you guys can play with the numbers once we have something. What I'm hearing, how about this? So this way you guys can tell me if I'm correct, is that you want to make sure that the fines are prohibit people from just going forward with doing something. That you want to make sure that there is a difference between something very minor in your planting bed next to your house versus a tree that is affecting a steep slope. You want to make sure there's a difference between, someone who should know better and someone who maybe should know better but doesn't yet. And you want to make sure that those fines are a deterrent. Did I get everything you guys want?
Except for the fact that everybody should know better. And I think we should educate everybody and not assume that anybody, even the little old lady down the street, has got to know if she's the owner. But usually they hire people. And those, we've got to make sure that if the owner wants to incur that fine onto the landscaper, then so be it. Or onto the remodeler, so be it. But the point is, we have got to take responsibility. We're homeowners, we're property owners here. We have to protect the town. So I say $1,000 is max. We, I think, yes, forgive a little tiny garden or whatever with a boxwood in it. But I think anything that could have a major tree in it or something that's remodeled that could directly impact maybe the guy next door's house or, or do something. I think we have to curtail that up front and just say, no, here's your $1,000 fine. I'm sorry. Or take it out or remove it.
I just need to know that's a consensus and then I can draft.
I think what you said was the consensus.
Mhm.
And you were going to leave. I think that what you said was a good consensus and a good place to start. I
Anything
do
further?
caution everybody on getting wrapped up in some of these specific things. It's a wily way to grant permission.
All right. So we've covered that item. No further discussion about that. So now we're going to move on to the site approval plan process, which Sarah also drafted a memo for us. Everybody has the memo dated from March 20th, 2024. And it's the category 1 site plan checklist. Everybody have that?
Yes.
Everybody had the opportunity to read it? Okay. Sarah, educate us.
So I'm going to start by kind of explaining how category 1 and category 2, anyone who's doing anything, that process works. So you guys kind of understand. So someone comes in the door, they have a permit application and they present it to the town. So it gets reviewed. If it doesn't have all the pieces, that person gets contacted and said, this is not a complete application. Please bring us these pieces. Once we have everything, we will review it. And so that happens multiple times as all the pieces need to come in. And so that's what's happening with category 2 site plans. And then they're reviewed for critical area, forest conservation, tree, floodplain, zoning, all of that. And then they're not just reviewed by me, they're also reviewed by other departments because they have other pieces they need to review, like code and public works. So sometimes when someone comes in and they're asking for a permit to take down a dead tree that is 8 inches around, everyone reviews it, but none of the code applies. And so they can go forward and take that down without a permit. So that said, for the category 1 site plans, what I did in this memo was simply to go into the code and copy out what is required to be in a category 1 site plan per code. And then I made it shorter so it fit in a somewhat reasonably sized checklist. And so everything you see here are code regulations for a category 1 site plan. And a category 1 site plan is not complete if it does not have all of this. From a zoning perspective, there may be other pieces that other departments ask for, but without all of these things, it's not done. And if it's not done, it's not submitted. And if it's not submitted, your clock doesn't start. So that's the process is until it's complete, there is no ticking clock. And these are the items that your laws require for it to be complete. So I don't know that we want to delete anything or change anything from what's required because it's just frankly what's legally required. And I think it's in a format that's easier for you guys to review than looking at the legislation.
I have a question. What is the cost difference between a category 2 versus a category 1?
I don't know that
Okay.
off the top of my head. I can look it up if you want.
But obviously a category 1 is a lot more involved
Yes.
entity than a category 2.
Yeah.
And typically, would you say, what is the, how long would it take? So the clock begins when I bring my category 1 application. When I get the high sign from you, all good, the clock begins.
Mhm.
Usually that process,
Mhm.
if, from what I'm hearing you say, is that typically it's not a complete application upon initial submittal.
Mhm.
And so does that go, how long does that take for the application actually to be complete for category 1 typically?
So I haven't had a category 1 yet.
Okay.
Since I've been here. I've only had category 2s, and I've had category 2s come in complete and I can just look at them and say, yep, it's approved. And I've had category 2s that have taken months because the proper documentation is not coming in despite repeated requests for it.
And the category 2s, if my application is incomplete, I'm dealing with you as the town planner. You're the one who makes, or the town administrator.
So actually it's Fran, what's her title? Her title's Public Works. Public Works Coordinator who communicates back to the resident.
Oh.
So she communicates with me and then I communicate what is needed. She's able to know what's needed for the most part. So generally when she's taking in an application at this point, it is very close to complete, but it might be missing a few things and then I'll ask for those. So that's cutting down the time that I'm spending making sure it's a complete application for category 2. I think category 1 would be a different process.
Thank you. Does anybody have a question for Sarah?
I have a couple of questions. I guess the question really is, there are some things I'd like to add. Is that a possibility or is it a fait accompli? Or,
No, I think you can add things as long as we're legally allowed to require them.
well, for example, in parking plan, I think we should indicate where the ADA parking is or where the handicap parking is or how much we have. That's got to be in there. And we should probably have a thing about guest parking, get off-street guest parking. It says off-street parking, but off-street guest parking, because I know that especially for, planned communities, townhomes, et cetera, we were very concerned about having enough ADA and guest parking off-street for these developments. So I think we should indicate, how many.
So on specific,
So under parking plan,
yeah, under
we should be
parking lot.
including ADA and guest parking.
So I was going to say on specific schedule showing the number of spaces provided and required, including ADA and off.
Where is that located? I'm sorry.
Sorry, the last bullet. So I'm going to say specifically, where is it? I'm going to say.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, I see that, but I thought
say-
we would have to be specific on ADA versus,
The legislation may
mean,
or may not be.
but okay, I
can
mean,
add- so
okay.
Including ADA and
including
off-street guest
ADA
parking.
and guest parking,
And off-street guest parking or just guest
off-street guest parking.
Got it.
I mean, we were very specific. We
And
were
that
very
may be
specific
in the
about
more
that.
specific, but
Right.
we can definitely.
And then when, I know this is getting a little bit detailed and maybe we shouldn't have to, but when it goes to lighting, and that is under developments over 10,000 square feet. When it says lighting will not interfere with residents of nearby homes or others, and it should not interfere with the night sky. I know that's weird, but it's a thing.
It's California.
It's California, but it's a thing. And I know that Chris and I talked about that, and we were angry with Rod and Reel because of those parking lot lights up on top that
Mhm.
just illuminated the sky, and everybody was angry with that. It affects birds, and they've studied that, and they know that lighting is a problem for everything, everybody, and every animal. So if we can put down or others, or the night sky and others, I guess is how you'd say that.
Is the night sky a known
It is a known,
lighting term?
I want to say it is because I know I've heard it before, and I think I used it in my other planning situation, I think we've had to use it. I'm pretty sure it's the night sky is the terminology.
I just want to. So we can add it as long as we're legally.
We have to check that, but
Right.
it's something to that effect, and
Right.
you know what I mean? So if we can go back and figure out what that terminology is, but I know it's a thing.
What do you think is the legal constraint about that?
I just need to check
It's
what
the
the
spray-
ordinance
it's the
requirement.
spray of
Right,
lighting. And they have to be able to illuminate down. So it has to have some kind of a projection that goes down onto the surface and only illuminate a certain amount of surface. There's a very specific,
No, I'm just was asking if there was a legal ramification, because I know with the school, for example, in building the school, they had to make sure that whatever trees they were adding or subtracting didn't impact the lighting on people's homes and also the building structure, so that it wasn't negatively impairing their ability to get sunlight because of the structure. So
So the term that's used over and over in the minutes from your first term
Mhm.
On the commission was, I think it was dark sky lighting. And
could be. I know that we talked about that. With,
so this is a question for Sarah, because there is that minimum requirements clause. If you were to put it on a checklist, could the commission ask the developer to provide a lighting detail to his site plan as part of their requirements that they feel should be addressed? Or is that something that's not legally sound for them to do because it's not specifically called out in the code?
So this is for developments over 10,000 square feet, they have to provide that lighting.
Right.
And you can, when you see it, request that it not go up to the night sky. But I do not know what the town code says about lighting facing the sky off the top of my head right now. So that's the only we can put it on a checklist, but it might be something I can't require as staff, but you, when you review the plan, can request. And I can request it, right? But it might be, well, that's not required, so I'm going to go to planning commission. Right.
The other thing in Richfield Station that there's a lot of people that say it's a dark neighborhood. And one of the reasons is when the developer developed it, he put pole lights in front of each house and used them to light the street requirements. But then it falls on the homeowner to leave them on, but they're not leaving them on because they're not paying the light bill. So that's something else to take into consideration of when we're looking at the lights.
I think like all of this is more like when you get the plan, then you kind of start having that discussion and asking for things to shift and change based on the plan.
Yes.
Sarah, are you saying that you can't ask for those things? I mean,
I can, and so part of it I think is I know I've been here since September and we're getting to know each other, right? But I still, since we haven't reviewed a category 1 site plan together yet, I don't necessarily know what you're going to want and what you're not. I know you're going to, I know you're going to want mitigation and stormwater and all of that. And that the environment and how the environment looks is important. So when I'm reviewing the site plan, you know, I can say, hey, you might want to change this before you even bring this back because it's not meeting with that, but I don't know everything you guys might want yet. So I can't ask for that.
So a follow-up to that would be, if you can't ask it, can we,
Mhm.
whatever we want, without anybody knowing in advance what's important to us?
Right. So when the site plan comes in front of you, you can request changes. You can request things to be different when it's in front of you.
Whatever we want.
I mean, they don't have to say yes if it's not legally required, right? But generally, and not always, but generally, when someone comes to you with a development, they would like the process to be easy. And if you ask for something reasonable, like, hey, we would like the lights to have covers over the top of them, so it's lighting the street but not the sky, in order to make the process more simple and straightforward for themselves to say, okay. So not everything has to be legally required. You absolutely can ask for a development that meets your standards. It is obviously easier if those standards are in the code, and that allows me to say that ahead of time. And I can use my judgment and then tell them things I think will make their process easier. Like, hey, can you put those caps over now that we've had this conversation? I know that's something you guys are going to be looking for when I see this. But there will be things we haven't talked about that come up that you can ask.
That's why I like it on the checklists. It gives them the thought, they got to do it. They've got to do it. So that when it comes to
Well-
us, it may be done.
Right.
Easier, I will tell you from doing these site plans that it's much easier to have it done before it gets to you
Mhm.
than try and ask for those changes. Once the plans is already in front of you and, oh my goodness, they've spent thousands of dollars on these plans, and then to try and make those changes are not as easy. So if they're in the checklist and they go, oh, they're going to expect that, okay, well then I better, maybe I'll put that in, Even though it may not be codified, they still might do it just because they want to please us.
Madam
Never
Chair,
know.
If I could suggest that, because I haven't done a category 1 site plan with y'all, but a lot of you have done category 1 site plans. Could you potentially collect people's specific things people want to see on those category 1 site plans, and forward them on to me so that I have some of that in my head?
You mean from the commissioners or
Yeah.
from? Mhm, certainly.
That would be helpful, I think.
I think you did a pretty good job here, but I bet Commissioner Blackwelder has some more thoughts. I'd like to hear what her thoughts are on this.
And speaking
That's
Will
well,
be-
that's right.
I have no
That's right.
choice. I have no
We got
choice.
Phones.
You can attend the hearing, you know, the next meeting when we discuss that. She can be finally, will be public comment.
Commodore.
I am not going to harass you all for anything but things that have to do with the FIDS parcel. Simply because I do think that you have council members that are, that have been on planning and zoning. The mayor has been on planning and zoning. They should be supporting you and making sure that it should be a full court press effort in this town to make sure that the development comes in appropriately and that it is appropriately paid for by the developer. And it shouldn't feel like it's all on you all. And there should be absolutely no finger pointing game on you all if you miss something. That is, things should come to this commission very tight, much tighter than they did when I arrived on the commission. There's no excuse for it not to. You have people that have been in office for 20 years. They should be directing their staff to protect the town. And I know Sarah has a mind to protect the town, but as she said, she is new to the town. She probably has no idea what different things can happen in this town. And there's a lot of different things that can happen in this
Let's
town.
not scare her.
Um,
Yeah, let's not.
Yeah, let's not scare her.
It's not.
I've had some interesting experience.
Yes, yes. So, you know, like I said, it should be a team effort, and the team effort should be going towards making the developers develop responsibly so that we don't drain all of our tax dollars on their developments that they should be paying for. And that they come in nicely, that everybody says, wow, that's a nice looking, whatever it is. That should be a team effort, not what kind of backdoor loophole deals should be going on. So hopefully that's the case. I dare say it was not the case when I arrived, but, so that's my general comment, but I do have some comments about this checklist with regards to the RPC. So there's no page numbers on this checklist. But
On Sarah's, no.
Oh, number
Commissioner
5,
Blackwell
page
is
5.
referring
there's,
to.
there's, my notebook is covering up Sarah's page numbers, which she did include. So page 5 is the checklist for the RPC. And it only calls out section C and section E. However, in our code, 290, 29016, we have our residential plan community, and we have, you know, A, B, C is the development plan. If you flip the page, you have a blank page, and it looks like maybe it stops there, but it does not. There's a D that RPC should also adhere to. D says things like, not more than 5% of the total area of the RPC may be devoted to office, retail, service uses. Not more than 50% of the total area may be devoted to single-family attached townhouses and multifamily dwellings, and not more than 5% of the total area shall be devoted to multifamily dwellings. Not less than 10% of the total area shall be devoted to single-family detached dwellings. Not less than 10% of the total area of the residential plan community shall be devoted to open space and basic recreational facilities for principal use of residents of the RPC. Not less than 10% of the open space area provided shall be developed for active recreation such as playing fields, mini parks, surface playing courts, etc. You know, and it has some more things under D in our code. E is called out on the checklist. That's the procedure. And I think kind of like what Cindy did with the Dark Star lighting, you need to put another little item in the checklist. HOA presidents are notified. Community, you know, if it is an HOA community, the community needs to know that there's a site plan happening in their area. And so I'd like to make a motion to, well, I'll make a motion at the end. In addition to E, which is called out, there's also F, change to approved development plan. Any material change in an approved development plan shall be submitted for approval in accordance with the same procedures for approval set forth in the section above and shall require the submittal of a revised overall development plan. At a minimum, material change shall include change in the following: the proposed use of any portion of land, including open space.
Commissioner Blackwell, stand by for a minute. Sarah, are you following along with what Commissioner Blackwelder is reading from?
I am, yes. So when I developed the checklist, I was more focused on before I'm even going to review it to see if it is not more than 50% or not more than 10%. You've got to provide all the information. So that's why that's why the pieces that she's referring to aren't on the check. The checklist is, do we have everything we need to review it?
So in your summation of the this checklist is doesn't reflect everything in.
Once it's actually being reviewed. Right. So, okay, do we have all these pieces? Yes. Okay. Now it's in front of me and only 5% of the total area is devoted to single family detached dwellings, then this is denied. Right.
Okay.
You didn't bring me a correct. First, I want to make sure it's complete, but if you didn't bring it correct, then we're on another.
Then it goes back.
Right.
Right.
The other point is what you have and you're looking at on your laptop. Are we able to see it?
Yes and no. Like
Okay.
it's it's I can do it. It's just you're not going to be able to read it probably here.
Because
Oh, it's
Oh.
blurry?
Yeah, I have pictures too, but not for this piece. It's,
do you
it's not
have-
that it's blurry so much that it's small.
so are we
Can-
going to be
can you read
able
that?
to
If we turn the lights off, we might be able to read
is there popcorn? No.
it. It doesn't
If
work?
are we going to be able, Sarah, in the future, because what I would like to do is when we have an instance where a commissioner is citing from, the code, that all of us are on the same page and can follow along. And that's why I think it's helpful if we have the video, or that we can see the actual document that a commissioner would be reading from. So we're all on the same page.
I'm trying to make it bigger, but you see once it gets to a certain size,
Right.
right?
So
So
you
wh-
asked us to bring our code, so
Right.
if you all wanted to turn to 290:26, you could follow along. It's 290-16 and the page is 290 semicolon or colon 26.
290-26.
290-16 and the page is down here.
It's confusing.
290.
It's not, the code is 29016, but the page number is 290. It is confusing.
I don't know if you can actually see
The
it.
light was off. Is there a way to turn that light off? No? Oh, then they can't see our beautiful face.
Yeah, I just want, in the future that we have this opportunity. I mean, I think it's fine, that we have books, but I want to make sure that everybody's can follow along, because some of the books don't have all the latest versions, and I think this is one way to keep us all on the same page.
Yeah,
So why is this?
because
Not-
the lights are on.
Oh, so if the lights, the downside is we can have it, but if the lights are on, then we can't be seen. Is that
I
the
think-
deal?
If we turn off the lights, then the recording cannot see the planning commissioners, but the planning commissioners can see the.
So we have a lighting issue. This is the night sky for the planning commissioners.
Well, do we have to turn all of them
No, we
off? or
can't
can we have
really.
some of them
There you go.
Or there's, I don't know.
I can read that. We just don't.
No. You're not supposed to use the flash.
Yeah, especially this is important with maps and site plans when we need pictures of site.
Yeah, I have photographs.
You all probably
too.
need some kind of smart board instead of a projector. It would
Yes,
be
a smart
a
board would
very
be
nice addition to
outstanding.
the town.
I think in the future, we're going to have Chromebook.
I did hear that rumor.
Yeah.
What we might be able to do is use like shared, when I'm typing, I could, if everyone has like an email address, I can share a live file and you guys can see me type. Like,
Right.
We can try and work some of that out.
Right. But I think the town administrator had talked about going to the mayor about us having Chromebooks because I think that would really be helpful. I mean, it's 2024 after all.
That would be a nice improvement.
Okay.
Sorry to be missing it.
Only town
Only-
council awaits.
Only 5 years ago, we had that. Okay, so has everybody arrived at the page with the RPC?
Yes, we've arrived.
Because it's
We've all
very
arrived.
important for many reasons. Mainly because the boundaries of the RPC have been redrawn, but yet half of the things that were drawn outside of the boundaries are part of the original subdivision's open space. And so, well, we'll get site plans in the RPC, and you will be able to require as a condition that the RPC, that the HOA gets the open space. And that includes the FIDs, and that includes the other open space parcels, or you can deny the development. That is something that would be uncomfortable for you all to do without the support of the town and the staff. And but it is allowed. And the town shouldn't be taking the HOA's open space. So I'm just gonna say it like that. There's a whole, we reviewed 2 site plans in the RPC. They came through as revisions. This is when I was first on the commission, and not one person directed us to the comp plan, and not one person directed us to this section where it said that, we should be looking at the whole development. So the planning commission at the time was not directed to look out for the HOAs. And the developer made revisions. And some of those land uses changed based on their revisions. And we, the planning commission has no idea whether or not the HOA would have appreciated that. And planning commissioners themselves said things like, provided that the HOA agrees with the changes. But I don't think they realized that they were dealing with potentially things as maybe as big as their open space, their FIDs, their, the site plans were presented to us as a difference between a grinder pump and a municipally owned pump. So it was very disingenuous the way it was presented. I would like to make those motions regarding this checklist. So
Are you going to make the motion?
I would like to, actually, before I make the motion, I'll make the motion anyways, but before I make the motion, I am curious as to what everybody thinks about these sections of the code and how you feel about potentially reviewing a site plan in Richfield Station that involves the requirement that you get the entire development plat, because that is the requirement. It was a residential plan community.
Well, let's not go off topic. Vice,
I was just, Madam Chair, I was just gonna, it seems to me like, when I was president of an HOA, the site plan had to come to the HOA and get approval first before it went to the town. Is that the way it is here, or do you know? I don't remember how that works here.
So category 2 always has HOA approval.
It
if
always
it's
has
an
HOA approval before it comes to the town. You would require that before you would entertain.
I think it would be difficult for the HOA to approve a category 1 site plan, right? Because it's a large.
Right.
So it's probably more of a notification, and I know there's notification requirements. So
So another thing that has happened is a lot of the plats in that RPC have been redrawn. And so there's an easement around the entire RPC of various different plats. They've been drawn. They were supposed to come through the planning commission. It wasn't legal for anybody to redraw plats that did not come through the planning commission. But they have been redrawn. I don't know if they mentioned things like the FIDs or things like that. But without that entire development plan, you all will have no way of knowing whether or not enough open space remains based on what kind of development they are asking for.
Not only that, some of the plats in Ridgefield Station, the same plat was filed numerous times on the same day that kind of contradict each other.
Illegal, all of them.
has that been your experience, or you haven't
again,
you haven't done
I haven't done a category
category 1?
1. I haven't, been involved in anything with Richfield Station and HOAs. I mean, there are basic open space requirements that are going to be in the when we're actually reviewing it, right? And you are going to want to consider everything when you're reviewing it.
So,
So I don't know what happened in the past, and I can't answer for what happened in the past. And I don't think any of us can. We can just move forward doing things in this way.
okay. So, is it possible for you to look into that and to see that the category 1 at some point during the checklist that it has already been reviewed by the HOA? And that the plats can have been established or are established, that you would know that?
I mean, I think it's difficult because there are like timeframes on our review process, right? And certainly there are, again, notification of the HOA, but I don't think we can add HOA site plan review, right? And then, because if the HOA reviews the site plan, then it comes to you all and you say, I want to change X, Y, Z. Now, where are you?
Well, what I'm asking is that when it comes to one of the check marks would be that it has been through, when you get the application right now, there is no indication that it's been through an HOA site plan review on a category 1.
Right, because a category 1 is a big,
Endeavor. Right, it's a big structure.
right. So to add an HOA review of a category 1 into the process, I think that needs to be legislative, would be my opinion, because and an HOA board doesn't
Codified.
have the same training you all get for that review process. So
Well-
I definitely think that's a question to bring back rather than something we can.
So in the case where the plat has been submitted multiple times,
So the plat
How
is
would-
sorry, a plat is being submitted where, because the plat is just part of the checklist, right? A plat is just something I need to see. So if the plat is wrong or doesn't have everything on it, so for example, people do have to give me a plat with their shed on it. If they give it to me and it doesn't have the shed or doesn't have the, I say, please redraw this or go get an actual plat or whatever that is. So the plat isn't changing from a category 2, but I guess what's being said is if we want to present different plats may be presented for a category 1, because then you're doing the subdividing if it's not already done.
So part of the approval process includes 29016E4. The town council shall hold a public hearing on the reclassification and development plan according to the provisions of Article 7. The town council shall review the entire record of such application and public hearing and may affirm, deny, modify, or establish such other or additional conditions to the recommendations of the commission as it may deem appropriate regarding such application consistent with the intent of this chapter. So the review, it wouldn't be like a site plan. You can't ask an HOA to conduct site plan review, but you can put on the checklist, HOA notification has been complete and it's already included on the checklist. Is the proposed land use in compliance with 29016E? So I think that's weird wording because the land uses are in D. So I would just make the motion to have this checklist under residential plan community have a box for each portion of the code that we have. Comply with 290-16A, comply with 290-16B, comply with 290-16C, comply with 290-16D, comply with 290-16E, and comply with 290-16F. And then I would add an additional block that says is it affirmed that the HOA president, if the development is in or adjoins an HOA, has been notified? So that's my motion, to add those things to the checklist, every single section of this code.
any further discussion? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? You vote?
I wanted to ask if we need it. What? I'm trying to figure out if we need it all. I'll have to vote. Let me think. Give me one. I'll vote. I'll vote for it. I'll vote for it.
So previously, when we wanted permits, we would come to the town and the town would approve the permits and then they would bring that to the HOA and the HOA would review it. And because the town approved it, then the HOA ARC committee would review it and make sure it met all the other requirements. That process has now changed. So now the homeowners are going to the HOA ARC board requesting it, and then it comes to the town. So I like that at least the town, I mean, at least the HOA board is receiving some kind of acknowledgement that this is what's going on in the community so they can let the residents know what's happening. Otherwise, there would be nothing no notification that's going to be coming in.
I guess I would, was for the part of the HOA being notified, but I don't feel like every piece of the code needs to be said, is this in compliance in the checklist? Because that feels like that's the conversation that we have to some extent when we're doing when we're approving the site plan.
Right, but they're not going to bring you, for instance, I mean, we already voted, so it already passed. But just for your own knowledge, they're not going to bring a full development plan unless they're told to. And they need to know in advance that they need to bring that. And that is, there's a lot of leverage to get back what has been given away of the HOA's rights over the years. There's a lot of leverage there. And, I think that's probably one of the reasons why I won't be back for next meeting, is because I am of the mind that it should be used, that certain things were taken away that shouldn't have been. And, it's just y'all's ball game coming up next. Thank you for passing that motion, because it's it's something to make you think and remind you to think.
All right, it is now 8:03. I'm sorry, it's 8:01. We haven't addressed signage and fences. Do we want to continue on, or do we stop here?
Probably, Madam Chair, I do have a packet here. If you could all look through this, I think I would like to wait until next month, I'm sorry. Signage is a pretty heavy subject, and if you could go through what I have put together, not only some pictures for you to look at that you all know very well, but also a sample from St. Michael's of a very a fairly good sign ordinance that I think is fairly complete. Ours is very outdated. I know that Chris and I have been talking about it for 7 years to try and change it and make it, improve it. But anyway, if you all could, and make sure you bring this back, because our poor clerk has like copied this several times already. So notice that I've got a lot of definitions in the very beginning here, a lot of, and there's just a lot more detailed code. So if you can compare the two, compare ours to St. Michael's, and maybe research another town and bring that information. But I would like to, if we could start in on this at the next meeting and get going. My last town, it took us a year to get through signs. So I don't know, hopefully it won't take us a year, but
It's a big topic.
and
I
it's,
agree
and
with
you
you.
do have to do you have to do some oh my gosh, what are we calling it when the town comes to discuss it? What do you call it? An opening? You have to have some hearings. We have to have them, the town council, it's a very big deal. So we have to do this right. Anyway, if you can hold on to that for the next meeting, that would be great.
So, I take it we are going to motion to adjourn. All right, having said that, if you want to submit your additions to the checklist to me, and then I will forward them on to Sarah, that she can look at them and add it to the language so we can look at that at next month. That would be good. And then we'll address signage and fences next in May. That will be the first off the bat. And then I've asked Sarah to talk about her work, how and why she does what she does. And just so I think that will kind of clarify and help us all to understand the process better that she goes through in reviewing an application. So.
Thank you. I guess first, the way I approach things is, what do your regulations require and say? And if it's not compliant, it's not compliant. And that's all there is to it. It has to be changed to comply. So, when anything comes in, I'm reviewing and I'm going and I'm looking at the regulations each time to make sure I'm not doing it by memory. And I am, again, working with Public Works Coordinator to make sure the applications are coming in complete. And then certainly people do not want to comply, and they want to call me and explain why they shouldn't have to comply. But the answer to that is, this is what we require of everyone. So this is how it's done. I have had some people that are unhappy because they can't do what they want. We have had people go to Board of Appeals for things that have been denied. So do you have everything, and are you in compliance with our regulations? And even sometimes, some things sort of technically in compliance because there's mitigation. I have asked for the mitigation to be moved to a better location to collect stormwater, runoff. I've asked slopes to get changed. So I don't know if that helps. Is that kind of what you were asking me to present?
Right.
So if you suggest.
Mhm.
Clock necessarily have to go back. Your suggestions part of the plan and then bring it back, and then you say the clock is starting.
There's not as much a clock on the category 2s as the category 1s, I think. I think you guys have to review them within category 1s have to be reviewed within a certain amount of time. I'm reviewing the category 2s once or twice a week, everything that comes in. Definitely every week, there's a time I go in there and check. Sometimes I go in and check multiple times. And then we get the package complete. And once it's complete, I'll review it, and I may ask for changes that better meet, because most of what it is that 10% rule, the stormwater 10% rule. So is this meeting the 10% rule? Okay, maybe it has 3 shrubs for your 150 disturbance, but those shrubs are on top of the hill. So I'm going to ask you to move them off to the bottom of the hill, because that's where the stormwater is going. So the idea, the approach I am taking is not, here's your mitigation, throw it anywhere on site, but your mitigation is resulting in a or estimated 10% water quality improvement and stormwater quantity reduction from your site. So that's how that works.
May I clarify something that you just said? What is the time frame that you think a category 1 site plan needs to be according to the code?
So I do not have it off the top of my head because we haven't dealt with it yet. But there is, once the category 1 site plan is in and complete, you guys have to see it by a certain time frame.
Right, but I do not believe that's codified right now.
It is, yeah.
What is that time frame?
I don't think,
I can
I think
look
it's,
it up,
yes.
no more than 60.
To go from you to up. Is that what we're talking about?
but no, to go from stamped to you all.
Yeah, as soon as you receive it.
Stamped.
It's complete.
which means it's
Yeah.
complete.
Let me find it.
So,
I'm quite certain that town staff who receives the application knows off the top of their head what that time frame is. I just don't because I haven't
right,
had to
so
use it yet.
the turn-in time to stamp,
There's not, if you didn't turn in a complete application, then there's no clock ticking because
Right.
you haven't turned in a complete application.
Until it's
Right.
complete, the application, the clock doesn't start.
Do we have a clock once it has been submitted to us? How long until we need to say yay or nay?
Yes, I thought there was,
I feel
Uh,
like there is.
by the next when we receive it, by the next meeting.
there is not. I mean, Calvert County has had site plans for years. There is not something like that. Additionally, if you don't have enough information about a site plan, you can abstain, like you don't have to approve, or you can abstain and give the reason of why you don't have enough information and require the developer to bring back the information you need. There should be no steamroll on category 1 site plan review, none whatsoever. That is a wrong thing to do to the Planning and Zoning Commission.
But that did seem to be a point of contention in the hearing that's happening
Board of
with the
Appeals.
Board of Appeals. So like, I do think we need to figure that out.
Well,
I mean, because we had discussed that their attorney seems to be saying something different.
Right.
well, I think that.
Their attorney says a lot of things.
I think that, that it's important that there's, for example, the school, Beach Elementary, is a category 1. And so obviously, we're not going to be able to review something, plan and zoning, in a meeting, 2 meetings, because there's so many facets of the
Yeah.
structure. So, but perhaps I was thinking, I've read there was a requirement, but it might not be for a category 1 when the clock starts. But I know that the application doesn't begin until it's stamped and then the clock goes. But yes, as in the Board of Appeals, after site plan approval, sometimes it's a year before even ground is broken on the project, but.
I think
but-
it's more so I don't hold on to the plan and never give it to you, right? Like that's
the-
why that's there, that I have to give it to you within a certain time from when I get
And
it
then
complete. Doesn't mean I have to or would.
okay, that's what, because that did seem to be a point in that hearing.
Right. I
Yeah.
understand that that's a point that Mr. Blitz is making, but he's going to make whatever point he can to get what he wants, but he really doesn't have a case.
Yeah, I just would love to see the code either way, just to make sure, because he seems to be referencing it so that we don't put ourselves in a position in the future again.
And he's going to do that over and over again. He'll come here with his.
So do we have?
And that's exactly why, and I'm going to go to the town council and ask them for an attorney for this board. It's ridiculous that this board does not have an attorney that you can consult with. I've seen the tree board go into closed session.
The tree
I've
board
seen-
has not gone into closed
I
session.
watched your meeting. You consulted with Todd in closed session. you
That
did.
was regarding, right, that was.
The Board of
regarding to
Appeal.
fine. Well, I don't,
Into closed session.
um,
Why?
let's
the
not
planning
go into
commission
this
never done that?
discussion now, okay? Is there any other questions for Sarah regarding her review process?
Can I just make one point? It says 60 days. The Planning and Zoning Commission shall approve, conditionally approve or reject a site plan within 60 days.
That's,
period of time for a
It's not,
category.
no, you've got to, that's why we have that
That is
checklist
for
of important.
items below.
That's
and
why
those
the
are
checklist is important.
Category 2 site plans. It is up for debate. It's not set in stone.
Are there any further questions for Sarah? Okay. All right,
I will move approval. I mean, I will move adjournment. I'm sorry.
all right. We are adjourned 8:15.
All right. Well, that was a fun last meeting, guys.
Wait, don't go. We have cake for you.
All right.
No, I'm serious. You and I have differences